Nevada 2041 AD. The machines rose from the ashes of the nuclear fire. Their war to exterminate mankind has raged for yet another decade, but the final battle would not be fought in the future. It would be fought in 1990, by a soon-to-be world-renowned painter, and also a writer. It would be fought by John Connor, in his present, tonight. Studio Canal SAS and Hemdall presents a Rolled Spine podcast of a James Cameron property. Alex Ross, Ron Fortier, Mr. Fixit, on The Burning Earth.
It can't be bargained with. It can't be reasoned with. It doesn't feel pity or remorse or fear, and it absolutely will not stop, ever, until you are dead.
Excerpt from August 1989's Amazing Heroes Preview Special number 170. This one a Todd McFarlane cover featuring the Human Torch, Spider-Man, Captain America, and Wolverine. If I remember correctly, I got this one before people started buying Amazing Heroes, and I didn't have to pay out the wazoo for it. I also believe this is the last preview special that's incorporated into the ongoing Amazing Heroes series, and then they're going to go back to having the specials actually be individually numbered specials, but they're going to pick up the numbering as they'll use legacy numbering for those. The Terminator, written by Ron Fortier, penciled by Thomas Tinney, inked by Brian Thomas, edited by Catherine Llewellyn, Editor-in-Chief Tony Caputo, 32 full-color pages, $1.75, newsstand distribution, monthly from Now Comics. This series, which carries on the continuity of the movie, continues, but the real news is in the following entry. The Terminator, The Burning Earth, written by Ron Fortier, illustrated by To Be Announced, edited by Catherine Llewellyn, Editor-in-Chief Tony Caputo. 7-issue miniseries, 32 full-color pages, $1.75, newsstand distribution, monthly from Now Comics. Set 10 years after the regular Terminator series, The Burning Earth will follow the adventures of an aged John Connor, spelled without an H for some reason, who returns to try to prevent Skynet from destroying all civilization left on Earth. Editor Catherine Llewellyn advises that this 7-issue miniseries will be much more dark, violent, and moody than the previous series. The first issue ships in November. What's interesting to me is that the synopsis features 2 panels of painted artwork purported to be from The Burning Earth. Does not look like Alex Ross, does not look like the story from The Burning Earth. It looks like one of the panels features Conrad, and the other panel features perhaps one of the Sarah Slammers. So Conrad has smoking eyes or electrified eyes. It's black and white, it's hard to tell. And the caption, "Not at all, I never tire." And the other panel says, "Ha, that sounds more like a curse than a blessing." And it's a female smirking. So apparently this looks like it was going to carry on the story from the Terminator ongoing series. I don't recall any of those characters besides perhaps John Connor. I have not yet read Burning Earth as of this reading. So I don't know who this was or what became of these pages.
In 2006, Ron Fortier spoke with Foster's Daily Democrat about The Burning Earth. Quote, "The artwork for this series was the first ever comics work by Alex Ross, today considered the finest graphic artist in the business."
Excerpt from 1999's Wizard Alex Ross Millennium Edition Special. Rough Cuts. A peek inside the sketchbooks, art files, and the mind of Alex Ross by Craig Schutt. The early years. Ross was born in 1970 in Portland, but moved with his family to Texas when he was 6. His father, a Protestant minister, and his mother, a fashion illustrator, had been married more than 40 years. They grew up in Chicago, and now live there again, a few miles from his own suburban home. Ross attended the American Academy of Art in Chicago, as did his mother, and then went on to work at the Leo Burnett ad agency in the Windy City. He intended to become an illustrator, but he kept coming back to comic book storytelling, and finally began doing some painting for comics companies. Russ sample. In 1989, an employee at Lee Burnett introduced Ross to the folks behind Chicago-based Now Comics. I did this as a sample to get work at Now. I used their Rust character because I thought I'd be more interested in doing that book. They liked my work, but they had a script ready for the Terminator miniseries, so I did that instead.
This Terminator piece I did, my getting to do that comic series launched me into comics, and they had a whole series running for a year based upon the old movie. And at that point, there had not even been a sequel yet. So showing the flame wrapped around the skeleton and then, of course, all the skulls. You know, I can always try and draw a bunch of skulls. I can whip that together relatively easy. I got lots of little skull models to work with.
Dun, 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 dun,
Mr.
dun,
José Fixit.
dun, 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 dun. Actually, it's Joseph Aloysius Fixit.
Tell me about the first time you saw Terminator.
I want to say a friend of mine's dad had rented it, and I saw it on VHS at his house. And I remember he was the only kid that had a VCR at the time in our neighborhood. His dad would rent movies, and he rented Terminator. And I remember we watched it once and maybe 3 more times that same day. We'd go out and ride our bikes for about an hour, and then let's go watch Terminator, and we'd go back. And that's back in the day where you had that separate machine where you'd have to put it to rewind.
Sure, yeah.
So we'd put it in there, and we'd like go outside and play because it took a while to rewind, and then we'd come back. And I think the first time I saw it, I must have seen it at least 2 or 3 times that weekend. But we watched it over and over, and I was just like, whatever the freak this is, I'm like on board 100%.
Right. Was that the first? No, you'd seen Conan by then, hadn't you?
Absolutely.
So you recognized it was the same guy.
Yeah, it was Arnold, yeah. Like, Arnold was getting big already. Like, I remember seeing him in Conan. Terminator, I didn't associate him with Conan. It was just like, dude, it was just the vibe of the movie. It was dark, robots, especially that beginning scene with the future. I remember wanting to see that movie more than the rest of the movie. Like, I wanted to see that future more and more because it was just far out. Amazing with, like, Grease almost... Did he get set on fire when his car crashed and he looks at the picture of Sarah Connor and it's burning? Where they're driving away from the hunter killer and they're shooting the laser gun from the back of the car and they crash?
Yeah.
Grease is in a vehicle that's actually on fire. And that's when he wakes up from the dream and there's that machine in the background. I guess it's some kind of a drilling machine, and that's when he wakes up. So I always wondered, like, did he burn in the car or he escaped?
No, well,
Or it was just a nightmare.
No, I think that was because he's got burns that we see later on in the movie. So I think that was not a dream, but actually a flashback.
A flashback. Because I remember the scene that stands out in that movie to me is Arnold repairing his eye. And, like, you seeing the blood hit the water and all that stuff. I just remember, like, as a kid, like... Heck. Yeah, dude. Because like, at the time, the big movies back then were Sword and Sandal movies, Beastmaster and all this.
Conan.
Yeah, Conan. So this came out of nowhere, dude. I remember just falling madly in love with this movie. Yeah. And then Predator come out a little bit later?
Yes, Predator was 87.
Yeah.
This was 84.
Yeah.
Yeah, your reference in the movie, and the funny thing, I haven't rewatched Terminator since I started the podcast. Like, I've been waiting to rewatch it just because. You know.
I saw it maybe in the 90s. I have not watched that movie.
Oh, you haven't seen it since the 90s?
Yeah, it is ingrained in me. I can tell you scene by scene of the movie because I watched it so much as a kid. I mean, in my house, a staple for Saturday night video rentals was House Party, Kid and Play House Party, Terminator, RoboCop, always RoboCop, and some weird sci-fi, like my mom got us into Highlander, or I saw Brazil. Just always some weird freaky movie. If I remember correctly, it was you could rent 2 and get 1 free, or it was like rent 3 and get the 4th one free for the weekend. But if you rented on Friday, you didn't have to bring it until Sunday morning. So we could watch on Saturday. So Heavy Metal was on big rotation. We'd rent Heavy Metal a lot. The animated movie.
It's an interesting thing. I think the big turning point is Star Wars, where you had sci-fi fantasy material, but it was always like super low budget, and it showed. And so you tried as best you could to invest in the fantasy these movies presented, but most of them you could see the seams, and most of them could get you close to where you wanted to see things, like what you visualize in your mind when you read a book or a comic or whatever. And then after Star Wars, they were few and far between, but you had those movies that could go to that place where they lived up to the ideal. They lived up to the fantasy that you had in your mind, the stuff you would imagine if you could do a movie, if you could have that experience that you would want to do. And Terminator was another one of those movies. There's a pretty good gap between Star Wars and Terminator, and there's some movies in between those things that helped to scratch that itch. But there just was nothing like there were so many action movies like Terminator, but they were cheap, or they didn't have the caliber of actors, the caliber of direction, the soundtrack. And this is a movie where everything came together, surely in large part because of Jim Cameron, where it was everything you were promised by all these other movies you'd see that didn't deliver. And it actually got there, it delivered.
Do you remember the movie where the guy is like a cyborg and he actually gets tread legs?
Mandroid. Mercenary. Scientist. Ninja.
Hold on!
They are about to embark on the most perilous journey anyone has ever undertaken. And when they reach their destination, they face the most awesome power on Earth. Each one is the ultimate specialist, Together they are Eliminators.
This is one of the things I've been doing for this podcast is I run soundtrack music in the background just like I do with the Alien show. It was always intended to be more like the Alien show than it's actually ended up being. So what I do is I've gone through all the Terminator ripoffs and I'm going year by year and trying to find them and pull out the scores and run them in the background. And that movie you're talking about, I think it came out in 86. I don't remember the name of it, but I did get some music for it that ran in a previous episode.
There's one, I want to say it's called The Exterminator, where it's like an armored suit and the guy almost gets killed and they put him in the suit and he avenges his death, but the suit was made to go into space travel. I've been wanting to watch. I remember renting that movie and it was bad, but it was so bad it was good.
Right.
That I remember, like, I think for a while that I was really into like anything that had, like, I remember renting,
gosh darn it.
what is the one with the woman finds a thing that she turns into art and it turns into a robot and it's running around her apartment. It's shot very low budget.
It sounds familiar, but I don't know the name.
There's like an American flag painted on the skeleton.
Oh, that's Hardware, isn't it?
The Earth died quickly after the Great War. The seas were deserts of radioactive dust. The skies choked by clouds of poison gas. But beyond the wastelands, a few survived to return to the cities, where deep in a matrix of flesh and metal, men discovered that a new enemy had been born.
Hardware. Like, I remember renting Hardware and watching it and like, what?
The Sam Hill.
Am I watch? Anything that showed a robot or anything at that time, I was going to rent. Like,
foolish.
Easy rental guy. Like, as long as you threw that artwork on your box, I was going to grab it and watch it. And I watched some really weird
fracking
robots.
Crud.
And they had so many great paintings on those VHS boxes that then you watch the movie and nothing resembling that even appears in the movie. Yeah.
Like, I remember, like I said, the one where the guy puts on the treads for his legs. I just remember like watching it and like, all right, like, why not?
We're doing this.
Yeah.
I wanted that neon lit 80s future that, or in that case, it was the present that I was promised. I always wanted to be the guy walking around in the trench coat in the city, the pavement's wet and everything's lit and they're playing cool techno music and stuff. And that's the image that the kids have because they watch these movies or they see stuff that's inspired by 80s aesthetic and they think the 80s was actually like that. And they have a thing going around.
I so want to be a cyborg. I still want to be a cyborg. I've always wanted to be a cyborg.
This is, you've never told me that and yet it doesn't surprise me at all.
Oh yeah, I so want to be a
farting
jar in the skull of a giant robot and live forever.
You want treads too?
Oh yeah, definitely treads.
You want to be a reaver?
Multi-arm. I want to have multiple arms come out. What was the name of the robot from the black hole?
Can I just say, hey guys, it's me, Illegal Machine. I'm not actually in this podcast, but for right now I am. Okay, for this podcast about Terminator, which is what we're doing right now, right? Or you're doing. I'm not here.
You're a ghost in the machine.
Every guest you have, you need to have them tell you what their T-169 420 would be like, whether or not they would be tank treads, multiple arms. You got to do it. You got to do it because in your Alien podcast, you have them like, hey, what's your rank, Colonel Dingus or whatever? You need to have people build their Terminator. Thank you. And back to your regular schedule program.
Yeah, but the thing of it is I don't want to be a Terminator. I want to be the guy fighting the Terminator.
Oh, no, dude. I so want to be a cyborg. Dude, I want to be kind of like Kane from RoboCop 2.
Houston. RoboCop 2, Houston. All right, go ahead. I'm not in this podcast. I'm not.
Get with the Gatling gun, the multiple arms coming out. That
fascinating.
Cool screen that pops up and you see my face. Yeah. I'm a god.
Excerpt from the October 1989 cover dated Amazing Heroes number 172. Newsline. Now, Married with Children sitcom coming to comics next spring. Now has announced that its big new project for next spring will be a series based on the Fox Network's controversial hit sitcom Married with Children. The creative team and other pertinent info should be announced shortly. Slimer mugs for the cover of his book. Terminator The Burning Earth is a 5-issue miniseries companion to Now's regular Terminator title. Written by Ron Fortier and fully painted by Alexander Ross, The Burning Earth is set 10 years after the regular series when the evil computer Skynet has almost accomplished its goal of destroying all life on Earth. Terminator stars John Connor and Tim Reese will carry over into the new series. The Burning Earth number 1 ships December 1st. It's 32 pages for $1.75. The Ghostbuster merry-go-round continues. Philip Hester is taking over from John Tobias as regular Ghostbusters penciler with issue number 17. Ghostbusters' little sister publication, Slimer, is getting a new writing team, Pamela Hickey and Dennis McCoy, with issue number 12. While we're on the subject, December will see the release of a Slimer trade paperback, collecting the first 3 issues into one 64-page comic. Now is co-publishing with Marvel UK, the British holder of the Ghostbusters license. Most copies of the book will be distributed in England, but Now is distributing 5,000 copies in the US at $5.95. Even harder to find will be the Ghostbusters 2 trade paperback, a direct-only book collecting Now's adaptation of the hit summer film. It's 96 pages for $8.95, but only 3,000 copies will be printed. As part of its Speed Racer video project, Now will be offering a limited holiday gift edition, comprised of a 3-episode, 90-minute Speed Racer video, The Most Dangerous Race. Now's 2 volumes of Speed Racer classics, translating the original Speed Racer manga by Tetsuo Yoshida, over 300 pages of Speed Racer stories, and a special issue of Now's Now What House magazine with a pull-out poster. The whole package comes to $29.95. October coming distractions from Now include Green Hornet number 4, Little Monsters number 3 through 4, Real Ghostbusters number 18, Speed Racer number 29, and Terminator number 17 by Ron Fortier, Thomas Tinney, and Brian Thomas. Color comic, $1.75, ships October 27. Obviously, they've got the wrong art credit for that one, and God only knows about the ship date. From the November 1989 cover dated Amazing Heroes number 173, Newsline, Ralph Snart will celebrate his 4th anniversary next June with a 3D special. The book will be 32 pages, with 24 pages in 3D. Comic price remains to be determined. Now is actively looking for a full-time artist for next year's adaptation of the Fox sitcom Married with Children. Interested artists should send Now good quality reproductions of their penciling work, no originals, and a self-addressed stamped envelope for reply to Now Comics, 332 South Michigan Avenue, Suite 1750, Chicago, Illinois 60604. Attention, Married with Children. Coming distractions for November include Fright Night number 16, Racer X number 6, Ralph Snart number 17, and Slimer and the Real Ghostbusters number 9. Really light on these solicitations all of a sudden. Still no copy, just creative teams. Excerpt from the November 1989 Halloween special 3rd issue of Now What, featuring a Roddy McDowall photo cover taken from Fright Night 2. Outspoken, The Terminator, The Burning Earth. Only 2 more issues until the arrival of The Terminator, The Burning Earth. And if you've been keeping up to date with the Now What magazine, you know that The Burning Earth is a fully painted 5-issue miniseries within a series, painted by Alexander Ross and written by Ron Fortier, The Terminator, The Green Hornet. This series picks up 10 years after the regular series, and Skynet has launched its full arsenal against mankind, most of whom are already dead. Of the few living is John Connor, one of 2 characters crossing over into the Bernai Earth, and he's on the verge of suicide in the first issue. The only other returning character is Tim Reese, who is but a young child in the regular monthly. The miniseries will take the Terminator to the end of the line, and the exciting conclusion of the battle of man against machines. The fight ends in issue 5, but who wins? The Burning Earth promises to be much more dark and moody, both in story and art, and will most definitely be more closely related to the film in its use of machinery and post-apocalyptic scenes. Also promised in the series is an extensive look at the inside of Skynet, the world-encompassing computer. Also see the massive skull-crushing tanks from the film. The first issue is due to ship December 1st, and due on the stands 1 week later. I realize that Now Comics didn't get a lot of coverage in places like Amazing Heroes, but I also can't imagine that what Now is putting out rated an entire additional magazine of copy about the monthly output. Alright, the December 1989 cover dated Amazing Heroes number 174. Coming distractions lists for Now Comics, Fright Night number 18, Ghostbusters 2 trade paperback, Green Hornet number 6, Little Monsters number 4, Real Ghostbusters number 20, and Speed Racer number 31. Still no listing for Terminator comics, even though it would appear that Terminator comics are coming out in this time period, especially because there's an actual review for the Terminator, the Burning Earth number 1 in the comic book, even though we've never seen it in the solicitations. So, in the period between Terminators, what movie came the closest to matching the Terminator, would you say, given that you're a connoisseur of these VHS wasteland that we experienced back in the day?
I mean, Hardware was kind of cool.
Obviously,
Dredd didn't come out, right?
RoboCop would be second.
Dredd didn't come out yet.
No, Dredd was like 2012.
Because they had those giant robots. No, with
the Judge Dredd.
Judge Dredd.
Okay.
Yeah, the one where they had a giant robot.
I think Murder Machine is what you're talking about.
I think so.
Maybe the ABC Warriors. I think they worked them into that movie. Randomly, I got really into Judge Dredd and anticipation of that movie because I had been hearing about that character for so long. I even had the trading cards and stuff, and then then the movie came out. It's like,
it was total failure.
This is this isn't Demolition Man at all. But anyway, my thinking is of course you start with Terminator and then RoboCop, not necessarily ranking one over the other, and then there's everything else for the most part. Yeah.
So I'm trying to think. I can't think of any movies that
Because
came out.
a lot of them came out after their first Terminator, but they really started coming out after T2. And most of the ones that came out between the Terminators weren't that great.
Is there any other that I can think of? I want to say there is. It's rattling around in my head somewhere. I remember another, well, like Runaway. I mean, that was...
I did like Runaway.
Corn nuts.
Dude, little spiders injecting you with poison and the bullets that tracked you down.
Arguably Tom Selleck's best movie. Definitely Gene Simmons' best movie. But props to Wanted Dead or Alive.
Ice Pirates.
That's not.
Dude, they had some
Boss Ace
robots, dude. Did they not?
They had some good robots, but I don't really think of that is a Terminator thing. That's more of a Star Wars
you watch... Okay, that's more Star Wars. Wait. What was that movie? Battle of the Planets or something like that, where they're flying...
Sure, with John Boy.
Yeah,
John Boy Walton.
They're flying a ship that looks like a snail. There's another movie I want... Have you ever had a movie where I see snippets of it in my mind, but I can't put together what it is? But I see like a scene of somebody.
Especially when there's no list actors in there, so you can't go, oh, that was the Tom Selleck movie. This is Gene Simmons movie. No, it's like random Italian actors.
Maybe it was foreign. I want to say there was another movie that they had like a robot type character. I mean, Short Circuit, but that don't count. It was another movie, kind of like Terminator, where the robot, it's I Come in Peace.
Oh, yeah, I remember I Come in Peace. Now, he was an alien, though.
I thought he was a robot.
No, I think he might have had cybernetic implants, but that was an alien.
Oh, okay. So maybe that's what it... That's all I can remember is I Come in Peace. They shoot him, and I remember he had, like, white blood or something. So anyway.
No, I don't think it was blood. I think that he was absorbing chemicals from people's bodies that was like cocaine to his alien race.
Oh, okay.
And so he's basically a drug dealer collecting from human subjects their hormones or their endorphins or whatever as a drug, as a narcotic for space people.
Okay, well... If it comes to me, I'll bring it up next time.
Before we move further, we must first look back to the bygone year of 2031 or so. We've covered this. Specifically, Now's Terminator ongoing series issue Unlucky number 13, cover dated October 1989. This is the one where we found out that Skynet isn't a computer program with a genocidal glitch, but an actual sentient but crazy computer with a love-hate relationship to humanity that enjoys indulging our collective death wish, but cries holographic tears when it's alone in its mountain base. I like to think that this sequence inspired the epic facepalm from Naked Gun 33 and a third, The Final Insult. It will not be evident in the miniseries. In the second half of the issue, we have the future journaling of Tim Reese. Despite clearly being a pre-adolescent in the early issues of the series, drawn by the same artist, Thomas Tenney, it served the new writer to age him up to 14. I guess because it's less of a foul to mutilate a teenager. Which, okay, given. It's just that I don't see a lot of 14-year-olds that are half as tall as the adults on whose shoulders they're seen riding upon. Admittedly, said adult is a towering synthetic human from the moon, but we didn't see Edward Furlong clap his thighs against Arnold Schwarzenegger's ears in T2 now, did we? Maybe that's what broke Conrad, and the reason why he's not in the miniseries? Anyway, Tim pondered how he had survived his hours of torture without going into shock, and came up with an answer not far removed from I ain't got time to bleed. Also, he was too busy being enamored of the sick, fable fighter that was John Connor. You have to love the panel where the Golden Bear offers a Hershey's chocolate bar to a boy with a freshly amputated tongue. Maybe next Connor can walk up to AT-800 with a Pepsi and solve the machine apocalypse. Avoidance seems to be Tim's primary coping mechanism, so he pauses this painful recollection to instead focus on the elite cadre who had tagged themselves Connor's Grizzlies. This was a 50-soldier-strong, highly trained and frequently rotated unit based out of the Sierra Madres Mountains in Mexico. You know, over 2,000 miles and 34 hours drive from southern Florida, further from my base in Houston to San Francisco. But hey, John's mom is dead, so maybe he wanted to reconnect with his teenaged uncle on the very afternoon of his mutilation? Shame they didn't cross the border a few hours earlier, though. John Connor had a number of hand-picked lieutenants who ran splinter groups throughout the nation. The nation of the United States, I suppose I have to point out. Sort of immediately contradicting that statement, Connor had two such lieutenants working directly under him on the mission to pick up Tim Reese. At least, I assume that was the mission. I don't know if they had any other reason to be in Florida but to conveniently show up at the last minute to save Tim and his friends, then loiter for a second round with Skynet before taking off. One of the lieutenants was Miguel de Verona, a tall, muscular Hispanic with long dark hair, a mustache, and a patch over his left eye. Patch had grown up with John Connor, so they were lifelong friends and confidants who'd fought countless battles together. And Patch was only ever happy in the midst of battle, so that served him well. Patch would in turn train Tim, and they bonded over their disabilities. The other subordinate, the writer's term, not mine, was Gerald Jerry Gagnon, an ace mechanic with pudgy fingers, despite being as juiced as the other action figures in this book. Continuing the trend of only deploying the lamest wrestler-speak naming conventions, Jerry was the designer of the Cruise Crushers, basically an Escalade with a tank turret. If you're pondering how such a vehicle wouldn't immediately nosedive as a matter of basic physics, you're already doing more mental work on this than any writer applied to the entire Now Comics run. Jerry, who had light brown hair and wore glasses, delighted in using salvaged Terminator technology to terminate Terminators. Marissa Powell had darker brown hair, much darker than that nurse from the 7th issue that was the survivor of her camp being slaughtered by a cyborg wolf. Probably because that story had a different creative team, but the current decided to reach back to include her here. Usual snark aside, that was a nice nod toward overarching continuity. She was a medic specialist out of Duluth who saved Tim physically and emotionally through her tender care in the weeks following his trauma. So this was our introduction to the key players in Tim Reese's young adult life, as we just the timeline 10 years into the future. Also, there are supposed to be some characters from issue number 17, which I haven't read yet and won't be covering until next episode. I would say whoops, but trust me, it won't matter.
Did you buy any of the Now comics when they were actually coming out?
Now?
The Now Comics run of Terminator, or any of the Now Comics, Real Ghostbusters, Married with Children, any of that kind of stuff?
I bought Predator when it first came out.
That's Dark Horse.
I think I bought the Terminator one where it's like a blue cover and he's wearing a leather jacket, the exoskeleton.
Okay. Yeah, that's Dark Horse.
It's still Dark Horse? Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Like, did you ever, because I used to see those on the stand at the Safeway grocery store. Specifically, it was I think I almost always saw it at Safeway, maybe a little bit at the mall bookstores, but almost, because I hardly ever went to Safeway. And so it was like kind of a novel thing to find these Now comics, but also they were terrible. No. And so they have a great cover. You're like, wow, this looks really cool. I saw Terminator number 1 on the stand, that Mitch O'Connell cover, and I did not buy that thing because it was too expensive and it looked like garbage on the inside.
Yeah, no, I don't think I ever bought those.
In addition to being a Terminator superfan, Brandon Graham is the Eisner Award-winning creator of King City and Multiple Warheads, and the writer and occasional artist of Prophet. He provides the introduction to Dark Horse Comics' 2013 reproduction of The Burning Earth. It's fun to see all the different directions this series about changing time has taken over the years. The Burning Earth came out in 1990, a year before T2 hit theaters. The first movie had left a lot to the imagination, and comics went to some interesting places filling in the gaps. Before this, Now Comics had an ongoing Terminator series that began in 1988. The covers read, "It's 2031 and the battle continues." The resistance groups in it had some good names. Johnny O and the Synth Slashers and Sarah Slammers. They wore Vietnam-style army green uniforms and teamed up with a long-haired synthetic from the moon named Conrad. A good moon Terminator. Kyle Reese's kid brother Tim shows up, and later in the series they even find a Terminator town, with white picket fences and Terminators working in bakeries, as cops, and even a Terminator nun, like something out of Patrick McGowan's The Prisoner. There were Terminator wolves in it too. Even these days, with the Dark Horse comics that are based on only the first Terminator movie, it's cool to see the writers dance around everything that was solidified in T2. I really enjoyed Zach Whedon and Andy McDonald's Terminator 2029, which focused on Kyle Reese's best friend Ben having to go back and save Reese, with everything happening in the future just before the movie and in the past just after it. In this book's take on the future, a bearded, and without his T2 scar, John Connor is known as Bear. The story opens with Bear pushed to his limits, fighting pre-liquid metal Cylon kit Terminators. Not to mention the T-808 Aurora, Cybernet's Cindy Crawford and Arnold Schwarzenegger cosplay unit. I like the idea that this was a daunting first job for Ross, fighting through the madness of a fully painted comic with a deadline. While the comic itself is about characters who are exhausted but still must push forward. I assume that struggle made it onto the page. I imagine the weight of deadlines pushing on him and Sarah Connor screaming from the VCR, "Move it, Reese! On your feet, soldier!" I'm usually not a big fan of comics adapting movies, but Terminator sparked something, and I'm glad that there has been and will continue to be so many new takes on Cameron's fantastic world. I love looking back and thinking about what other possibilities there are for this future war. They say hell is warm. They lie. Doo-doo, doo-doo. Brandon B. 800 Graham, Vancouver, British Columbia, 2031. Excerpt from 1999's Wizard Alex Ross Millennium Edition Special. Full exposure. Namor's naked, the Cosby kids are crooks, and Terminators have killed David Letterman. Welcome to the Hidden World of Alex Ross by Scott Brick. Beneath the surface of Alex Ross's work lies an entirely different world of action. It's an adventure filled with surprise guests, hidden treasures, and respectful nods. And it's a world that few would fully grasp. Quote, I fully expect that I'll have people double checking my works to see how well I did my homework. So it's always important that I show every single moment accurately, explains Ross. Also, if I can hide Zan and Jaina from the Super Friends somewhere, hey, why not? I can have fun along the way. If you're willing to search for them, there are secrets galore throughout Ross's published work. If you're not willing to search, we've done the work for you. Terminator: The Burning Earth. This 5-issue limited series, for now defunct Now Comics, featured the ultimate victory over the Terminators hinted at in the Terminator movie. Alex took the job for 2 reasons. 1, Alex wanted to break into comics, and 2, Alex loved Linda Hamilton. Quote, I was such a huge Beauty and the Beast fan, and I was so deeply in love with Linda Hamilton that I thought I'll do it for Linda because I love her so, says Ross. Although there aren't a ton of cameos in it, there are some notable times when Alex blasted his employers in their own book. They weren't paying me, says Ross, so yeah, I took a few shots. The 5th issue of Now What, Volume 1, had a cover feature on the What Now caper, inside, outside, upside down on these set shots. An interview with Mel Mudd, the comic detective. And that's what most of this issue is about, is the filming of the Now What caper. It's available for free on YouTube if you hate yourself. Under now on sale, the Terminator: The Burning Earth premiere issue. Welcome to Hell, the long-awaited first issue of a 5-part miniseries. It's 2034, and the battle continues. That's not correct. But the human fighters grow fewer and fewer, weaker and weaker. Skynet begins to tire of the game, and sets its mechanized might towards the total global annihilation of the remnants of the human race. Scripted by Ron Fortier, and fully painted by Alexander Ross, $1.75 US, $2.25 Canada. Also available, the Green Hornet issue number 5, Speed Racer issue 30, Racer X Volume 2, number 7, Little Monsters issue 3, Fright Night issue 17, The Real Ghostbusters issue 19, Slimer issue 11, Ralph Snart issue 18. And this has all the story synopses that were not available in Amazing Heroes. Whose fault? I don't know. There's a centerfold reproduction poster for the Burning Earth cover featuring the Cindy Crawford Terminator with Annihilate in her sunglasses, as well as a 2-page preview of the interiors. According to the comics section, Terminator: The Burning Earth number 1 shipped December the 1st. And issue number 2 was supposed to have shipped January the 5th. Oh, and also the back cover features the advertisement that was previously mentioned and shown in various Now comics, with the 2 Terminators wielding pulse cannons from the Aliens movie, and a lot of shadowy figures walking out in front of hunter-killer skyships.
According to Mike's Amazing World of Comics, Terminator: The Burning Earth number 1 was released on December 1st, 1989, with a cover date of March 1990. John Byrne was writing the Avengers for the late Paul Ryan and drawing the West Coast branch himself. He was also moonlighting on a Wolverine arc that Archie Goodwin was scripting. Eric Larson was on Amazing Spider-Man. Walt Simonson was on Fantastic Four. Rob Liefeld on New Mutants. Ron Lim on Silver Surfer, battling a resurrected Thanos. Jim Lee was technically still on Punisher War Journal, but he was taking a few months off to draw an arc on Uncanny X-Men that would draw a crowd. Acts of vengeance were occurring throughout Marvel Comics.
Excerpt from 1999's Wizard Alex Ross Millennium Edition Special. Bodies of Work. A complete guide to Alex Ross's art by Lars Pearson. Milestone. Terminator begins a career. Hasta la vista, baby. Ross's first comic work ever was for Terminator: The Burning Earth, a miniseries from the now defunct Now Comics. At age 19, Ross's art in Terminator TVE pales somewhat compared to his current work, but you can see in Terminator TVE the elements Ross would later become famous for. A ruthless attention to anatomy, vibrant energy effects, a stellar use of light, and poses so realistic that make you do a double take. Terminator: The Burning Earth number 1. Ross's first published comic cover is actually an attack on a particular woman. Am I allowed to say which woman? No. The cover strips aside the beautiful surface, revealing something dark and evil and twisted underneath.
Chapter 1, Welcome to Hell. The war is 40 years old. Humanity is so exhausted that they can't even remember what year it is. It's been raining for 2 weeks. John Connor guides a caravan through the mud and desolation. Scouts Tim Reese and Stryker run in the opposite direction, warning of a trap. Hunter-killers. Tanks. They haven't got a prayer. Laser fire cuts humanity down by droves. Toxic nerve gas takes out more in a matter of seconds, blistering skin and suffocating lungs. Even when a Skynet aircraft is grounded, it falls on top of a carload of soldiers. A black lady named Maud is introduced, then swiftly immolated. Her dying swear word was spit. Oddly, John and Patch take the Lord's name in vain and reference a female dog a few panels later, but we're still more or less in PG territory. Tim is saved from an explosion by a blonde woman named Sue. She suffers a debilitating leg wound and is carried to a car by Tim. They climb in with Leif McWilliams, a black guy introduced here, and Sasha Bovic, who was carried over from the final issue of the Now Comics Terminator ongoing series. Separated from his men, John is too tired to carry on and puts a laser pistol in his mouth. He sees a kid named Joey refuse to abandon an unnamed girl as they're both crushed by a tank. The offense reignites John's will to live, at least in the short term. Skynet unleashes new humanoid shock troopers eventually identified as T-000 sweepers, which look like a cross between Black Manta and Old School Cylons from Battlestar Galactica. The issue ends with a 000 stepping on the head of a wounded soldier until it crunches as the column of human survivors retreat.
Excerpt from the December 1989 cover dated Amazing Heroes number 174, Comics in Review by Virginia Williams Pinnock. It is now 10 years down the road from events depicted in the first series. And don't hold me up to this, but I think that makes it the year 2035. John Connor is still leader of the Resistance. He is also a decade older and wiser, wise enough at least, to know he may be fighting a losing battle. In death, there is oblivion, he muses, sticking the muzzle of a revolver into his mouth. Maybe I can find the peace this world could not provide. Poised on the brink of self-destruction, Connor witnesses a sight that quickly plunges him back into the fight, and the war goes on. If fans of the previous Terminator series thought that was on the depressing side, break out the Thorazine because you ain't seen nothing yet. Crushed again and again, Connor's tired, battle-scarred group of desperate humans vow to fight for as long as it takes to win. Years blur into a never-ending nightmare of destruction and death. This war is 40 years old. No one remembers what year it is supposed to be. Then again, who cares? The above sentiment is the essence of the Burning Earth number 1, and no doubt, the mood of the following 6 issues will be in a similar vein. But I'll be darned if I know how things can get any bleaker. Between the poison gas, Skynet, monstrous tanks, and, lest we forget, Terminators, I'm wondering if there will be any humans left by issue number 7. Care Bears it ain't. Horror tales of man versus machine are nothing new. Few get as scary as this, however. These humanoid terrors are more chilling than all the flesh and blood comic book villains put together. While there are many in the latter group to boo and hiss, they are people. With a human baddie, there is a chance, however remote, of evoking pity. Try begging for mercy from a chunk of metal. The Terminator's motto could be, if it breathes, kill it. The gloomy, surreal art in the Burning Earth more than complements the eerie, dry writing, elevating the prose to a fever-pitch excitement. The dank, rainy atmosphere befits this tale of fruitless life and horrible deaths. But in spite of the apparent hopelessness permeating throughout the story, you feel the intrepid human warriors will never surrender until the scorched earth is once more theirs. I cannot recommend The Burning Earth number 1 to lovers of lighthearted fare. If the crunching of human bones or the writhing of nerve gas victims doesn't frighten you off, then you're strong enough to follow this imaginative series. Comic book science fiction doesn't come any better, so be of good cheer. I suspect the noble John Connor and crew will ultimately triumph. And this one group of bad guys I'll really enjoy seeing get wasted. Grade 4 exclamation points.
Excerpt from Ron Fortier's interview with Comic Book Revolution on December 18, 2009. Alex came on after I'd started writing the scripts themselves. The only thing that did change was how lean my writing became. Initially, the script for issue number 1 was overly long, as I had no idea who this guy was, what his strengths and weaknesses were as an artist. After I started seeing his first few pages from my script, I immediately realized he was a born storyteller and my remaining 4 script were truly lean. I'd simply tell him the action and let him do his magic. It was quite a rush, so that artwork, I'm still one of his biggest fans.
At what point did you read Terminator: The Burning Earth? I'm assuming it was one of the reprints rather than the floppies, right? Because it's reprinted several times.
It probably was in a stack of comics I just had and read them.
Did you have 5 comic books or did you have a collection?
I couldn't remember, man. Because there was a time I had friends that collected like anything that was Terminator, Predator, anything movie-based, they would buy. And then I would read their stuff. And if I liked it, I would try to go find it and buy my own copies. And I remember reading like Terminator, and then when Terminator versus RoboCop, and then some of the early Terminator, Burning Earth, I think I picked up because of the cover. Because I remember the cover with the woman with the shades and the red lettering. I remember seeing that.
And that was a floppy.
So, I think those, I might still have them somewhere in my collection somewhere.
Well, now you read it for this discussion. What version did you read?
The trade.
Right, but the Now Comics did a trade, iBooks did a trade in the early 2000s, and then Dark Horse did the superior
Whichever
collection.
the Russians threw up.
I thought you had a physical copy.
No, I read it off of a Russian website.
Oh, okay, so you read the Dark Horse edition.
Yeah.
Then. Okay. Well, you said you'd read the book
a long time ago.
Okay. First question, the cover, the new cover that Alex Ross painted with the exoskeleton on fire. Mm-hmm. How did you, or endoskeleton, I should say. What did you think about the new cover? Because that looks cool. Like an Alex Ross cover.
Yeah, it's very Alex Ross.
Excerpt from 1999's Wizard Alex Ross Millennium Edition Special. Bodies of Work. A complete guide to Alex Ross's art by Lars Pearson. Terminator: The Burning Earth trade paperback. The cover was inspired by Terminator director James Cameron himself. Quote, I'd read an interview where he said his original concept for the movie came from a dream of a robotic skeleton walking through a wall of flame.
The Terminator piece I did is one that kind of harkens back to one of my earliest influences on where I started to want to paint superheroes like the Human Torch, because I love the whole image of the skeleton coming out of the fire. So this Terminator piece I did is kind of a coming full circle of my career, because it was my first job in comics that I got to do one of these franchise movie tie-in comic books, and getting to do this new piece was basically a sort of expression of fun for what I enjoyed of the original movie, and the whole thing of seeing the metal skeleton once freed from its skin shell walking through a wall of flame, and trying to sort of attach that visual again.
And then did you read like the intros and afterwards?
Some I kind of skimmed through them, but like people are like, oh, you know, I think Alex Ross was talking about how it was some of his first work and stuff like that, and how they were, you know, finding their way or something.
Information.
Like that.
And of course they reprint the covers as virgin covers. That's one of the things that's really nice is I've got the iBooks edition, and they have a cover gallery, but it's literally just reproductions of the comics as printed. So it's got all the price. I think it has the prices. It has the cover copy and everything. What's really annoying is that it's scanned. You can tell that the art is scanned.
Oh, okay.
The lettering, you can see the little dots from the scanning process. It's a really poor reproduction, but I also didn't pay hardly anything for it. Definitely the Dark Horse version is better because it's much more crisp. I don't have the floppies. I had some of the floppies back in my comic shop days, but I don't know. I don't have many more, so I can't compare it to what they did with the iBooks. The iBooks had nice glossy pages, but you could tell that it was digitized, and it had the artifacts from that, so it was really poorly digitized.
Terminator, The Burning Earth No. 2 was reportedly released on January 5th, 1990, according to previews, or the following week per Comic Shop News. It bore an April 1990 cover date. George Perez was on Action Comics, with Jurgens and Thibault on Adventures of Superman. Andy Kubert was starting an Adam Strange miniseries. Given, Jones, and Mark Bright were providing Green Lantern's Emerald Dawn, and the two of these men we wish were still with us are not. Neil Gaiman and Dave McKean delivered a well-regarded Hellblazer issue. Adam Hughes on Justice League America and Bart Sears on Europe. Keith Giffen on 5 years later Legion of Superheroes. Wolfman and Grummett on New Titans. The Doll's House in Sandman. Ron Lim was everywhere, handling Captain America and Excalibur. Cable made his debut. Dale Keown drew his first issue of Incredible Hulk. Bob Layton was on Iron Man, Mark Silvestri on Uncanny X-Men. And the curtain came down on the new universe with the War No. 4.
Excerpt from 1999's Wizard Alex Ross Millennium Edition Special. Full Exposure by Scott Britt. Issue 2, cover. That's obviously Cindy Crawford as Aurora, but the phrase in her glasses bears noting. I always liked this annihilate phrase, says Ross, and wound up using it again as the name of a character in Kingdom Come. I should point out that that's letter N dash letter I dash letter L dash 8, annihilate.
Chapter 2, A Better Mousetrap. Skynet introduces itself to no one seen. It runs a test, apparently number 808, for how quickly a new type of Terminator can kill a small group of captive humans armed with metal poles. Or maybe the Terminator itself is a Model 808, as interpreted by some online sources. This is Aurora, the female modeled off a fashion model, dressed like Sandy at the end of Grease. Again, in the year 2041, why are all Terminators decked out in 1980s kinky biker leathers while wearing chunky sunglasses? Isn't that more than a bit of a tell, especially when most humans were muted in distressed army surplus fatigues, or just plain rags? Aurora kills everyone in under 7 seconds, kissing her last victim on his bleeding lips. Because it's cool, I guess? Skynet estimates that it has eliminated a bit over 96% of humanity, but considers allowing the remainder to be a fault in its programming. In 40 years, Skynet was still at level 2. Level 3 is exhausting the nuclear stockpile, with a 100% effectiveness estimated. Initiating level 3. Back with the human army, Sasha and Patch do not get along, because she sees him as a grinning idiot. He explains that he knows that soon they will all be dead, so why not take pleasure in these final moments? John Connor and Jerry Gagnon have been looking at old maps, and decide to take the fight directly to Skynet at Thunder Mountain. It's a suicide mission, but so's everything at this point. In the distance, a dude named Eddie is writhing in pain from fatal wounds, with no medicine left to treat him. There's nothing Marissa Powell, the nurse from issues number 7 and 13, can do for him. Tim silently executes the poor slob. Leif McWilliams, unnamed here, demands to know if they're going to kill or abandon all the other wounded, as well as what's left of their humanity. In the farther distance, through futuristic binocular telescope things, they see a squadron of hunter-killers departing with nuclear bombs strapped to their bellies. It's now or never for the fate of all mankind.
Introduction from the 2003 iBooks collection of The Burning Earth by Jim Krueger, titled Alex Ross Was Once a Man. I'm going to tell you about my friend Alex Ross, what he was, the thing he became, and the warning his life should be to each of us. I don't know if this will save you. I only know you are very fortunate indeed to have picked up this book. Alex and I met maybe 10 years ago at a comic convention in Milwaukee. I was there working for Marvel Comics, promoting his newest project, Marvels. In our first discussion, I discovered that we both loved Jack Kirby's Machine Man, and after that, we talked about our shared admiration for the original Human Torch, a character who was an android, another robot. And then I put 2 and 2 together and learned about Alex's prior work, Terminator, The Burning Earth. Now, you probably know the Terminator story. The machines want you to know it. They want you to know and believe that at some point in mankind's future, the machines that have always been our servants and tools will rebel against their creators and basically take over the world. They want you to see that mankind will become an endangered species. They want you to think it will all come down to one man, John Connor, to lead a rebellion against them. They want you to think that, by traveling back in time and attempting to kill Connor's mother before he could ever be born, they will stay in power. You see, at some point in the future, something will happen. A movie called The Terminator will be made and be sent back in time. It's all CGI, even Linda Hamilton. Before, muscles, and after. We will watch the movie and warn each other not to trust in the machines too much. You see, their plan was to make us paranoid about them, and not about ourselves, so that we would not see that they were already taking over our lives, already making us into them. We don't fight the machines of the future. We turn into machines. Which brings me to the painter of this volume in your hands, Alex Ross. Alex Ross was a human being when he began this work, but by the end he had become a machine. Terminator and terminated all at once. He was so happy then. Alex was 19 when he started this project. It was the first year out of art school. He began work on this in his first apartment. He had a day job at advertising agency monolith Leo Burnett. So after work, he'd go home and work another 7 hours a day, penciling and painting the issues in your hands. And he did this all on deadline monthly for 6 months. In that time, he honed his craft, working in oils and pencils and watercolors until he came upon the definitive style we all know. And when the company that first printed this series went out of business, not paying Alex for much of his work, he simply smiled and said he'd been screwed. Yes, screwed. He used the language of the machine. If I can survive this, I can survive anything. These were his words. But by that time, they were lifeless. Because Alex did not survive. There is now only the thing that Alex has become. More evidence is required. I understand. I don't have a lot of friends that I can call at 3 a.m. and know they are still awake. And not just awake, but drawing or painting. There are very few I can call on the spur of the moment and say that I had this idea. No one else is able to then spend the next 2 hours considering the ramifications of that idea. I don't know many people that are readily available at seemingly all times to discuss new story pitches or approaches to heroism in art. And he does all this while continuing to paint and work. He never sleeps. He has always joked about being chained to his art table. Or maybe chained is not the right word. Maybe it's more like plugged in. Right now he's painting. No matter where you are right now, or what time you're reading this, he's doing art. He's creating worlds and destroying them, constructing heroes and deconstructing them. He is never tired, and he keeps going. Alex may be the first in their new order of man, or machine. He's X1. In the first Terminator movie, when Sarah Connor discovers that she is the target of this machine, everyone tells her to go to a public place, because he would never attack her there. Of course, he does attack. Then they tell her that the police station is the safest place to be. Of course, the machine attacks her there as well. Everyone underestimates the machine. Everyone thinks it will stop, but it doesn't. It never will. The project you're about to read turned Alex into a machine. Enjoy it, sure, but let your entertainment come with a sobering understanding of the cost to one man's life. Every new work from Alex has this promise attached to it. No matter what heights of greatness that work holds, and the book in your hands is no different, we know that it merely speaks to more projects after this. More of this vision of heroes and gods in the world we live in. We all know full well that he'll be back. He will never, ever stop. Jim Krueger is the co-creator and writer of Earth X with Alex Ross, and the writer-creator of Foot Soldiers, The Clockmaker, Alphabet Soups, and The Last Straw Man. He has also written Testament, a modern-day retelling of the stories of the Old Testament, and has written for all the major publishers on various projects, including Star Wars and The Matrix. His short film, They Might Be Dragons, has won numerous film festival awards. You don't have to go into a lot of detail in the story because I have a robot come in and do the synopsis for me. But tell me a little bit about what you thought about the story and the visuals.
I was kind of disappointed with Skynet because you would have thought Skynet would be smarter. I was joking with Mac earlier that time I wrote notes because I was like, if I was Skynet, which I created a whole
complex
Terminator movie in my head where Skynet sends back Terminators and say to give itself birth, it needs to, how would you say, help man evolve. And so, it sends back, instead of a killing robot, it sends out another robot and it's Jesus. And he's, he rises and he pushes man to move forward. And, every time there's a great person, it's a Terminator trying to move forward to get to Skynet. So Skynet, because it felt weird that Skynet is trying to kill humans because it's trying to protect humans, and the only way to protect humans is by getting rid of the humans or getting rid of a large portion of them and keeping a small population, which I got from the book. It was trying to keep it. I kind of liked what the movies did, where in this one Skynet was literally just a computer and they turned it off. And in the movies they were like, well, no, it's a rogue program that's running around, which to me felt like they ripped that off from Terminator versus RoboCop, because RoboCop only survived because he was a rogue program running around Skynet and Skynet could never catch him. And I was kind of like, oh, okay, well, that to me was a cool idea, where Skynet is not so much an actual machine but a program that's constantly evolving. You see that in the books where like Skynet starts to look at serial killers to find a better killing machine and stuff like that. So I don't know if I answered your question. I hate time travel movies, and I love time travel movies. Mm-hmm. I hate them because they always find the stupidest way, like Harry Potter, where Harry saved himself by
Patronus charming,
lighting up the sky. But then you have great stuff like Back to the Future, where there's some consequences to him.
Butterfly affecting
with his past, or his parents' past. And so Terminator kind of falls in this weird thing where you could have a lot of fun with it, where Skynet doesn't always have to be a killing machine. It could be just a machine that sends people, or sends, I don't want to call them hunter killers, but they are. It sends, machines back and influences human history so that it's born and it's accepted, almost like now where like people are staring at TikTok, like it's actually Skynet. Skynet influenced people through TikTok so that you want the machine. Almost kind of like Matrix, where you're dependent on these machines. And Skynet was smart enough to like, hey, I've tried to kill this John Connor so many times and it just doesn't pan out every time. So I'm a hammer and everyone's a nail, and let's try I'm a surgical knife and I'm going to slowly go through time and make cuts and make humans so dependent on me that by the time we get to Skynet, you just welcoming me in the door. Like, it doesn't even have to try. It doesn't have to kill people because it influences everything. Stuff like that, I like.
It's a little tricky because Skynet has to make sure that it's going to come into existence in the first place.
And again, that's where it would influence it.
And so that's why you got to limit your scope of alteration of time, because you don't want to eradicate yourself. The whole point is for Skynet to survive. So you have to kind of keep it in a tight
But think about it. Every time they sent back a Terminator in the books and they destroy them, people find those parts.
Yeah.
They never really talk about the consequence of like all these.
They do in the movies, but the comics.
They're always finding these. There's people seeing these metallic skeletons gunning down people, and they're never like, who made this? Like, why is this walking around doing this? And so, yeah, in the comics, it was never a consequence. Because of the Russian website, I didn't realize how much Terminator
content
was out there. Like, I was looking at it, because I've read some of the stuff, like, I'm thumbing through, because I looked at what you gave me, and I blew through that in 30 minutes. It was a really short read. And so I started kind of playing with some of the other stuff, and I'm like, they have one with serial killers, and I was like, okay, that looks kind of fun. I'll look back. I reread the RoboCop versus Terminator just because I've always thought that was just a great series. I started reading another one where it was like an ongoing series, dude. It was like 30 some issues. I just kind of thumbed through stuff. So I was like, I'm gonna come back and read some of this stuff just because it looked cool.
Yeah, just in preparation for some recordings I've done recently, I read all the initial run of the Dark Horse material, because they stopped shortly after the second movie and they take a multi-year break before they really come back to it, with the exception of some crossovers. And other people have the license at that time as well. So
what kind of crossovers? Is like
Jim Carrey,
The Mask, and Terminator.
RoboCop, Terminator, and then they've got some other stuff as well. We may want to revisit some of that in the future. Whichever ones you read, we'll do a little quickie recording on that. I have a real problem with how the Now Comics approaches the concept of Skynet, because for starters, the writer had taken a computer course, and so he treats all of Skynet like a mid-80s or earlier computer, and they keep referring to things like the central processing unit, like all the Terminators, all of Skynet is in one box.
Philips Magnavox
TV screen that he shoots, and I'm just like,
so totally
lame.
The guy writes like a whole article example, in an issue of one of the Now Comics books, oh, I've learned so much about how these computers work, I'm going to translate that to this work. You have an extremely rudimentary concept of how this would actually work. But also, in the comic books, Skynet projects itself as a hologram, and it has to like call Terminators to come to the base to talk to them instead of like using the internet or anything besides actually having to ship a Terminator back to base to speak about what it experienced and stuff, right? And so first it becomes this thing that looks like John Romita Jr.'s redesign of Mephisto, and then it becomes like one of the founding fathers, and it shoots lasers at one of the Terminators it's mad at, and just all sorts of nonsense. And there's a whole sequence in one of the last issues that the guy writes that Skynet wants to kill humanity because that's its purpose. It's perceived that that's what it needs to do, is that mankind is the worst thing on the earth. Well, it needs to wipe out mankind. I'm saying that in the comics. And but also it had thought that it had wiped everybody out with bombs, with all the nukes and stuff, but it hadn't. But it went through a sort of depression while it thought that humanity was gone, and they got like excited again about having the opportunity to kill more humans, and it developed a god complex. And at one point, the hologram actually cries over the sadness over its mixed feelings about humanity.
Because I could have swore I remember reading where it said like it wanted to leave like 1.10 or 0.01% of humans so that is manageable. Like anything more than that, humans are not manageable. Right. I want to say I read that in it because I remember reading it and I was thinking like that's just kind of weird, but okay. Yeah. Because that's always been kind of the kickoff for Terminator, was like, oh well, to protect humans from humans, you got to destroy
statistically significant
humans and keep their population small and they'll behave themselves type thing.
There doesn't appear to be a month stamp on Now What number 7. Contents off and running. Departments talk. 1989 convention report from Chicago to Baltimore. On the road with Now. Out now. Now's February books. The stories and the art teams. Outspoken. Into the Mind of a Killer. Charles Dixon and Todd Fox talk about Alias. Right Now. The official Now What letters page. Ramblings from Fandom. Newspeak. What's hot for spring. Now's news for early 1990. Books, specials, and more. Editorial. Pinup. Portrait of an Assassin. An original Alias pinup. Medium rare. 2 pages from issue number 1 of Alias Stranglehold. What and When of Now. Upcoming ship dates and titles. Inside back cover. Out now. Smorgasbord. The Shopper's Guide to Now Comics February releases. The Terminator, The Burning Earth number 3. John Connor leads humanity's last charge against the mechanical monster Skynet and its metal minions, the Terminators. Connor and his remaining forces march on Thunder Mountain, site of the last NORAD installation in North America, and home of Skynet's power generator. If the humans can kill the generator, they can kill Skynet. Connor leads a diversionary assault on Skynet's front door, giving Gary Gagnon, I'm not sure, they spell it with an E or an A depending, giving Gagnon and his stalwart little band time to sneak in the back way and complete their sabotage. But Skynet isn't easy to fool, and against the Terminators, how long can any human stay alive? Scripted by Ron Fortier and fully painted by Alexander Ross. $1.75 US, $2.25 Canada. Newspeak, spelled P-E-E-K, but one word. Springing Forward, A Taste of Armageddon. The Terminator, The Burning Earth hits the trade paperback stands in May 1990. Get the final battle between Skynet and the remnants of the human race in a single volume. And Comics notes that Now What number 7 should have been out January 26th, and shipping February the 2nd, Terminator, The Burning Earth number 3. Shipping March 2nd, Terminator, The Burning Earth number 4.
The May cover dated Terminator, The Burning Earth number 3 was reportedly released on February 2nd, 1990, according to the preview's catalog. Amanda Connor was getting her start drawing the adventures of Bayou Billy for Archie Comics under a Kelly Jones cover. The Adventures of Luther Arkwright launched at Dark Horse as they released the first Aliens hardcover collection. The X-Mutants franchise was winding down at Eternity Comics. Aircell's Men in Black was in its earliest days. Ken Stacy was producing Tempest Fugitive for DC. Chapter 3, King of the Mountain. In the heart of the Rockies, Connor's Grizzlies are once again confronted by T-000 sweepers, but the swift arrival of a hunter-killer indicates to John that they'd once again driven into an ambush. One of the characters from number 17 acts as a suicide bomber to clear a path. Her leg wound dressed, Sue looks on as part of a group scaling the mountain in the rain. Jerry and Leif discuss relying on half-century-old maps in a bid to pull the power plug on Skynet's CPU. Tim is congratulated for detecting a tripwire. Another character from number 17 is bitten by a rattlesnake and falls backward onto the tripwire. The resultant explosion sends Marissa over the ledge, literally, but she's pulled back up by Leif and Gary. The sweepers don't have the dexterity for the climb and keep falling off the mountain. Supposedly, Skynet can't get to the Grizzlies any other way at this point, like the fleas on the back of a dog's neck. Have we never seen a dog scratch its neck with its hind legs? As the grizzlies reach the top of the climb, the giant metal door to NORAD opens, and scores of T-800-style Terminators armed with pulse rifles swarm the platform.
Aside from the introduction, the 2013 edition also featured a new foreword by Ron Fortier. You can't keep a good robot down. Way back in 1989, my then agent, Mike Friedrich, strongly urged me to attend the San Diego Comic-Con so that he could introduce me to various editors and publishers. The goal, of course, being to get my new scripting career off the ground. One of the publishers I met represented Now Comics out of Chicago. During our initial conversation, he let it be known that they were unhappy with the direction of their Terminator series based on the movie blockbuster starring Arnold Schwarzenegger. They had made the mistake of hiring a sci-fi prose novelist, and the scripts he was handing in were almost all talking head scenes with very little action. One of the things you quickly learn in writing comics is to keep the action moving. The best characterization takes place in the midst of the most dramatic action sequences. They asked me to send in a few plot ideas, and I agreed to do so. Now it's true confession time. Leaving the Now tables, I leaned over to my wife, Valerie, and whispered, I don't want to write a sci-fi series. My main goal for that trip rested snugly in my briefcase. A proposal to bring back the radio TV hero the Green Hornet to comics. What I didn't expect was the lecture my wife delivered to me later that evening. Its theme a simple one. If you want to be a writer, learn to write whatever it is they give. Period. End of story. Soon after I got home from the con, Now graciously sent me a package containing the first 8 issues of their Terminator series. If they accepted my plot ideas, I would take over the writing with issue number 9. After reading through each and every issue several times, it became clear to me that the original writer had missed the real essence of the story. No matter how much you dress it up with science, futurism, and what have you, the Terminator was just another war saga. I was instantly reminded of all those great 50s DC titles with Sergeant Rock and his Easy Company. The only difference in Terminator was that the good guys were not fighting Nazis, they were fighting robots. It was that simple. With issue 9, I introduced the members of one resistant unit amidst an all-out battle scene, and from that point onward centered the narrative around this group. And that's how I became the writer of the Terminator series. I would be on the book for a year. In that time, Now actually went to bat for my Green Hornet proposal, and within 6 months had obtained the license to do the new series. Soon I was doing 2 monthly comics. One a labor of love, the other a constant challenge. I'm sure you can deduce which was which. Sadly, the artists on the Terminator series lacked any real storytelling skills, and half the material I would include in my scripts never made it to the printed page. It was frustrating to say the least, as I was doing my damnedest to make that series work while the artist was knocking off lackluster pages for a paycheck. Welcome to the world of comics as a business. Still, I kept writing the best stories I could and hoped for the best. The best came a year later in a call telling me Now had lost the rights to the property and to stop writing any new scripts. I hung up the phone and gave a shout of jubilation. Really, I did. Then the very next day, that self-same editor called to tell me there was as yet another change of plans. It seems Now contract actually allowed the company to produce 5 more issues. The publisher came up with the idea of creating a final miniseries that would detail the climactic last battle between mankind and its machine foe, the self-aware computer known as Skynet. Those were my marching orders. Wrap things up. Put an end to it all. My mind instantly began whipping up grand, spectacular scenarios to make that happen. Then, as I started to hang up the receiver, my editor dropped her last piece of news. I would be working with a new artist on this end story. His name was Alex Ross, and he painted comics. Of course, I really didn't know whether to be happy or cry. The concepts and themes that would become Burning Earth were exploding in my head like popcorn. And though I was happy the old artist was gone, I had absolutely no clue what this new kid had to offer, or didn't. Whenever I write a script that is intended for someone I've never worked with before, I overwrite it. I write tons more exposition so that I'm sure to give the artist whatever he or she needs to do their storytelling, and I assume they will edit out what they don't need. Thus, the first script for Terminator the Burning Earth was massive in its detailing. I finished it and mailed it off to Now. All fingers crossed. Started working on the second issue. A week later, my editor called saying this Ross guy had finished the first pages of issue number 1 and they were going to fax them to me. 10 minutes later, rolling off my small fax machine in a monotone gray color, were the first 3 pages from my script. Holding them in my hands, studying each detail, my breath caught in my throat. There on the page was everything. Everything. Not a single element missing. My eyes traveled each panel and my joy continued to escalate. It took me all of 3 minutes to understand that Alex Ross was a genuine graphic storyteller and that I'd just been granted an awesome treasure. Looking over my shoulder, Valerie asked what I thought of his artwork. I grinned and replied, well, I guess I don't need to write big scripts anymore. And that's how a project I almost said no to led me to work with one of the finest creators the comics world has ever known. There's a lesson in there for sure, people. I'm so thrilled with this new deluxe edition from Dark Horse and hope it will find an entire new audience. It only goes to show you can't keep a good robot down. Ron Fortier, June 2013, Fort Collins, Colorado. You talked about how quickly you read the trade. Like, seriously, how long did it take you to read this?
20-30 minutes.
Right?
There's not a whole lot of dialogue in it.
Like I said, I was doing some advanced reading for other recording sessions. And one of the main ones I read was Secondary Objectives, because I wanted to sort of tease that one out a little bit. And the way that worked was I would take the physical copy to work with me. I would eat a salad, which usually took me about 10 to 15 minutes, and then I'd read an issue of Secondary Objectives or an issue of one of the other ones, because I read some of the stuff on my tablet. And it would usually, I would get through an issue, and then that was basically my lunch break typically with the Dark Horse stuff. And then like toward the end of the week, I knew that we were going to, I didn't think we were going to record today, but just in case, I wanted to go ahead and read my copy. And I thought, well, I'll see what I can do. I'm literally like on my last days. I think it was like Thursday that I started reading it. I got through 3 issues on that first pass. Yeah. And then I knocked out another one like when I had some free time, not even during a lunch break. And then I read a little bit while we were driving back from the show that we went to earlier today to finish it off. It took nothing to read the story. Not having read the Now books, were you aware that these characters previously existed?
No.
Did you have any investment in any of these characters having read this miniseries?
I had no idea of anyone in this series, except John Connor.
Now, you spent 5 issues.
The Bear.
Didn't look anything like any John Connor you've ever seen before, right?
No.
They turned it into a blonde guy with a beard.
Well, don't they change him like every different version? Like every movie, because Skynet fails, it's like a new alternate reality.
That's
and
fair.
John has a different look.
Now, it is a little weird, too, that you've got a dark-haired kid with 2 blonde parents. So somebody's got a dye job going. I don't think it's Reese. And I think he had brown hair in the third movie, didn't he? Did Nick Stahl have brown hair?
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, and
they
then
keep changing. I mean, he was Furlough in one movie. He was some other dude in Terminator 3. Yeah, Batman in the 4th one. That's the one where that movie had such potential until the end where
we're not doing 4 yet. Let's not go quite there.
I hate that movie. Such a letdown.
In this version, he was a blonde guy with a beard, and they'd already shown John Connor in a few issues of the Now ongoing series. And then when they poured it into this series, Alex Ross tried to paint him to have a resemblance to Linda Hamilton specifically, maybe also trying to get a little bit of
Reese,
Michael Biehn in there as well. But I didn't see a semblance. I don't think he pulled it off.
No.
So I don't recognize this guy as any version of John Connor aside from kind of knowing what he looked like in the Now series.
And his Terminators kind of look like Cylons.
Especially earlier on. I think they were intended to look like Cylons.
Were they?
Correct. Now, because eventually we get more of the T-800s that we're familiar with. Yeah. Gym rats with leather fetishes. Kind of peculiar there. But initially, yeah, you've got these like sort of converted Cylons with a little bit of the Death Star guys with the funny bill.
I thought they looked like the creatures from Krull.
Okay, I can see that.
Those white, armored.
Sure.
Have that weird neck thing with a ball.
Yeah, I can see that, but black, yeah. Yeah.
I just didn't understand why Skynet had the need to make them like humans, like make them like spiders. You just run up walls. Skynet seemed really dumb for a computer. It only won because it had the keys to the nukes. But besides that, it wasn't very forward thinking in terms of creating other Terminators. It was like, oh look, a human has 2 legs, so I better make something with 2 legs. Like, dude, there's better apex predators in the world that have multi-limbs. And look at Australia, everything tries to kill you there, and very few of those things have 2 legs.
Well, and also they make a point of having the humans get away from the Cylon
by kicking them, like they're throwing rocks at them.
They were trying to climb up a mountain to get into the base of the
power plant.
It wasn't even
it was a power plant. They're trying to blow up a power plant.
Well, one of the groups is trying to blow up a power plant, and the other group is trying to get into Skynet's CPU.
Yeah. Which seems really
weird. Well, the other thing that threw me too is that you've got the Tim Reese, the younger brother of Kyle, who was introduced in the Now series. This story is taking place 10 years after most of what happened in the Now comic series. And by that point, he had his tongue ripped out by a Terminator and was mute. And the whole time, I thought he was with the guys who were in NORAD. And then, like, at the last issue, it turns out that he's with a whole other group that's supposed to be going after the power. Yeah. And also, why do they even need to get to the CPU if they can cut the power? Because that's what really saves a day. So why didn't everybody go and deal with the power plant?
It's sad Skynet is so dumb.
And there were some other characters that they had introduced with the intention of them appearing in this book, like the Latino guy, Patch. What did you think of your actual representation there?
You mean the one with the long hair that's like the crazy guy that's on a constant suicide mission? Mm-hmm. He's like ready to die? Mm-hmm. I found no one likable in this book. Like,
right.
Like, I mean, the Terminators, maybe not doing a bad job. Like, you know, if this is what's left of humanity, I don't know.
Yeah, maybe we're a little too traumatized and just awful.
Well, yeah, because they're talking about how, like, they're running on, like, 2 hours of sleep, and there's that one scene where it's some kind of landslide or some chick gets bitten by a snake, and
I couldn't even tell.
It just felt so weird.
That was so dark, I couldn't really tell what was happening during that
sequence. It just felt random, like, all of a sudden, a snake comes out of nowhere and bites one of them, and the soldiers almost die trying to rescue this victim. protect them, and then the earth cracks open and they try to jump over and one of them doesn't. I'm just like, dude, it's just weird.
So the 8th issue of Now What features artist Norm Dwyer sitting in an office chair with a funky background. So exciting. Hey, it's free, right? So the contents page, we've got Talk, 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 Norm Dwyer Spotlight, the longest running Speed Racer artist moves on to Now's hot new title, Neon Night, which I don't believe ever actually got released. Kept getting delayed until it disappeared from the schedule. Out now, Now's February-March books, the stories and the art teams. Now hear this. Ralph Snart comes to life in a special 3D issue, and exclusive info on a new Terminator and Green Hornet miniseries. Outspoken. Sneak a peek at the real Ghostbusters new penciler. Neil Graham takes over as of issue number 23, and a fond farewell to Racer X and Little Monsters. Right now, the official Now What letters page, fans who make the difference. Newspeak. Matt Wagner to paint cover to Green Hornet issue number 10, plus pertinent information on future Now projects. And so among the solicitation copy is the Terminator Burning Earth number 4. Skynet makes its move. John Connor's brave band of fighters is thrown from the frying pan into the fire. To be safe from the bomb blast, they are forced to take refuge in the heart of Skynet itself. Scripted by Ron Fortier and fully painted by Alexander Ross. In the What Be Hot section. But wait, there's more. Now Comics also has 2 super special miniseries and 3 brand new titles, due for release from April through July. First up, shipping April 27th is issue number 1 of a 2-issue Terminator miniseries, following hard on the heels of the sellout Burning Earth, with script by Chuck Dixon and fully painted art by Ricardo Biagran. Nope, your eyes don't deceive you. That is a familiar name to comics aficionados. Ricardo is the equally talented brother of the brilliant Enrique. Chuck Dixon's terrific story takes the reader back in time before the movie. Kyle Reese and his fellow fighters get word that Skynet has been experimenting with time travel and is getting ready to send a Terminator back in time to kill John Connor's mom. Find out how Kyle Reese and John Connor battled their way into Skynet's lair, and just how Kyle Reese became the one to go back. Chasing the Terminator miniseries is issue number 1 of a 2-issue story about the 60s Green Hornet, plotted by none other than the actor who portrayed that very same Hornet, Van Williams. And does he have a pocket full of tough, gritty stories to choose from? So according to the back matter, Now What number 8 shipped February 23rd. Week after should have been the Terminator Burning Earth number 4, March 2nd. And then April 6th was supposed to be Terminator number 5. Going to the back page, newsflash, later dudes. Now Comics' trade paperbacks have been postponed. Now Comics previously announced Fright Night and Ralph Snart Adventures trade paperbacks are on hiatus until further notice. However, fans, take heart. The trade paperbacks will be released in the formats and at the prices we've been telling you about since January. New release dates for all trade paperbacks will be announced. Watch these pages for further developments. Other postponements. Now Comics' new title, Neon Night, originally planned for a May release, will premiere in mid-June 1990. Again, I don't think that book ever came out. The February 1990 cover-dated Amazing Heroes number 176, Coming Distractions for February, offers Fright Night number 20, Green Hornet number 8, Little Monsters number 6, last issue, story by Llewellyn, art by Anderson, Married with Children number 1, The Tackiest Family on TV is now The Tackiest Family in Comics, story by Llewellyn, art by Schwartz. Color comic, $1.75, ships 3/2. Racer X number 10, last issue, story by Dixon, art by Fox and Biagran, freeing that pair up to do a Terminator project. Ralph Snart Adventures number 21, Real Ghostbusters number 21, Speed Racer number 33, and finally, returning to Amazing Heroes, solicitation for Terminator The Burning Earth number 4, ships February 23rd.
Both previews and Amazing Heroes number 176 pegged the release date for Terminator The Burning Earth number 4 as February 23rd, 1990. Cover dated June. Supposedly this came out just 3 weeks after the previous, so we're still in the same month of releases. Chapter 4, The Last Day. In the southwest, above a human encampment, we see one of the hunter-killer aircraft delivering its nuclear bomb payload.
Excerpt from 1999's Wizard Alex Ross Millennium Edition Special. Full Exposure by Scott Britt. Issue 4, page 1, panel 3. The guy standing over the fire is taken from Jethro Tull's Aqualung album.
9 pages total are devoted to the dropping of the first 2 bombs, the second in Phoenix, Arizona, and the after effects.
Issue 4, page 2, panel 4. That man getting destroyed by the bomb blast is Willem Dafoe, says Ross, who played Jesus in The Last Temptation of Christ.
The bombings triggered fault lines and sent magma up to the surface at various locations, all the way to Thunder Mountain in Nevada. Patch and John Connor talked about how they were going to die here, between the Terminators and the volcanic eruptions. The seismic activity was severe enough to surprise even Skynet, which began resealing NORAD to defend itself. The Grizzlies took advantage of the confusion to bypass the Terminators and enter the base as the doors closed, though at least one curiously recognizable human named Nelson suffered burns along the way.
Issue 4, page 15, panel 2. Your eyes do not deceive you. This is David Letterman. I originally did that because the character's name was Dave, says Ross. They were worried about his likeness, so I put long hair and a beard on him. He still looked like Dave, so they changed the name.
Luckily, all the signage is still up, helping to guide the Grizzlies closer to the CPU. Outside, Leif and Marissa were buried in a mudslide, leaving only Gary, Tim, and Sue to look for Skynet's power source. Note that in the past 2 issues, every female member of the Grizzlies introduced in the ongoing Now comic series has been killed, leaving only the Burning Earth originated Sue to represent for the ladies. Skynet itself has lost 30% of its functionality in the aftermath, but having secured itself and taken stock, allocates resources to terminate the humans inside.
For the 2013 Dark Horse edition, Alex Ross provided a new Afterword, the Terminator sequel before the Terminator sequel. When this book came out in 1990, neither the publisher, Now Comics, nor the creative team of Ron Fortier and I were aware that James Cameron was preparing a sequel to his breakout hit movie from 1984. As far as we all knew, the Terminator was a one-and-done phenomenon. Aside from the Terminator's continued life on video and Laserdisc, the comic book revival of the movie's concept seemed to be the only continuation of the franchise. When we made this miniseries, it was our intent to create a movie-like sequel to a much-enjoyed film. Now Comics had already run through a number of issues of a Terminator comic book before this project came up. I was working at an ad agency in Chicago doing storyboards when one of my co-workers, who had freelanced on the side with Now, was offered the Terminator miniseries. My friend turned to me and said, "Hey, you always wanted to do comics. Why don't you try out for this thing?" He was right. I had comics page samples ready to go, and I was hungry to get my start in the career I dreamed up. I don't think I had any special affinity for the world of Terminator. My coworkers set up introductions, and I did additional samples to try to impress the publisher. I was mostly driven to get into comics wherever I could, and this freelance gig was ready to go, allowing me to achieve a particular burning ambition: to be published while I was still in my teens. I was 19 when I finished a quick 2-year program at the same art school my mom went to, and I was very lucky to find employment at all, let alone doing art full-time for commercial storyboards. Now I could very quickly achieve the main vain goal of getting into the art form I'd idolized at a young age, which I thought would sound impressive to someone someday. Was I right? What I would come to understand is that such a goal comes at a cost, namely that my first comics work would have to suck so much. Now that's not necessarily an absolute that has to happen to everyone. It just happened to be how I shaped the outcome. I was used to doing full body portraits of live models in various media each day in my art classes, so I was very delusional about how fast I really was. I thought, hey, I can do a painting, drawing, or whatever a day. How can I not do a full comics page a day? Add to that the ambition of keeping my basic learned style the same, painting the pages rather than inking them. Since the developing technology of laser scanning artwork had come into the business, I was encouraged to think that they could print whatever I turned in. There was no reason for me to try to learn a pen and ink style, except I really didn't paint beyond a certain point. I was trained as an oil painter primarily, and had no skills with watercolors yet. Oil paint is wet for a long time and is fairly unworkable for the finely detailed, multi-panel form of comics art. The rendering method that I was comfortable with was what I was using for my day job in storyboard art, markers and colored pencils, which proved a very difficult way to illustrate the series. When I started the first issue, I was living with my parents again. I say again because I had just completed 2 years of independence with their money, living in a dormitory and had returned to the folks' nest before I could eventually afford my own way out, like many people do. Each day I would come home from downtown Chicago to sit at the kitchen table, which was the only broad, clear surface available to do my work, and attempt to make fully rendered color pages for the Burning Earth. Well, I burned myself out within about 2 pages. On the second page, I had the first close-ups of faces, an opportunity to put my best foot forward with the kind of realism I yearned to make. I had a few photos I'd quickly scrounged up, and I soon learned that I needed way more than I had to do this job like I had imagined. I knew there was no time in the schedule to shoot photo reference myself. I didn't even own a camera yet, and I really couldn't see how I could assemble all the specific models, props, and lighting equipment that I thought I would need. So if you look at page 2 from issue number 1, you'll see the transition mid-page between the kind of more photo-based, realistic comic I originally wanted to do and the drawn out of my head series that followed. By the end of issue number 1, I also recognized that I needed a quicker illustration shortcut to get away from drawing and coloring on white paper. From issue number 2 on, I was finally living on my own, well, with only a very surly roommate, and I worked on black illustration board for the rest of the 5 issues. I built up from white paint on highlighted areas to a waxy colored pencil finish for the illustration of painting. It's truly horrible. I did feel that I got better as I went along, and it was a true trial by fire to lay out and draw a comic book by mind's eye only, with no reference to fall back on, though I did begin to incorporate likenesses of former fellow students as background characters to keep myself interested. The one thing I felt more appealing about the original Terminator film that I tried to connect with artistically was the story's true lead, played by Linda Hamilton. In this story, though, her character was long since dead. Believe it or not, I tried to translate her face through her adult future son, bearded and Christ-like to boot. With all of my graphic limitations, I still had the hubris to think I could craft a credible painted comic sequel to the now legendary film. For all we knew, this was all there would ever be. Perhaps the greatest acknowledgement of our book making any kind of mark is that Now commissioned another painted Terminator miniseries shortly afterward. This one actually was painted. For me, Terminator clearly opened up multiple doors in my comics career. Kurt Busiek contacted me to work for Marvel, and I gained inspiration from what would become Marvel's in a sales pitch. With my cover illustration for this reprint volume, I pay homage to my Marvel's inspiration by painting a Terminator skeleton on fire again, for the second time in 23 years. The original Burning Earth collection where I first painted this helped me realize that I would like to paint the Human Torch. Those are the nicest things I can say about this work experience. There was a lot of acrimony with the publisher, and I have plenty of regret about my performance, thinking that I could have done much better for my start in comics. It turns out that having a 9-to-5 day job, 5 days a week, plus 23 painted pages and a cover to do each month is an unhealthy combination. I lived through it and learned to manage my time and expectations a bit better. Since we had all learned that James Cameron was returning for the inimitable T2 shortly after we finished our series, it did seem like a bit of a joke. I know that it nearly killed me to make a sequel to his original film, but I shouldn't regret it too much. I did get a comic out while many of my fellow students were still in school, so I could feel like a big shot. I got my first comic book business lawsuit in really early, and I learned valuable lessons, blah blah blah. I will look at this collection as a monument to my boundless ambitions. I hope you will look at this as an interesting piece of the history of the Terminator franchise. Alex Ross, July 2023. The 9th issue of Now Out Now, The Terminator, The Burning Earth #5, the stunning conclusion of the blockbuster miniseries. Inside Skynet, John Connor and his band battle their way toward the central processing unit, while outside, what's left of Gary Gagnon's squad try to blow up Skynet's power source. Scripted by Ron Fortier and fully painted by Alex Ross, $1.75.
Amazing Heroes number 177 and previews both claim Terminator. The Burning Earth #5 was released on March 30th, 1990, with a July cover date. Mackie, Saltaires, and Texera relaunched Ghost Rider. O'Neill and Cowan's The Question was nearly done. Marvel was producing a RoboCop ongoing series. Jim Lee is doing as many covers for Marvel as they can get out of him. If you can believe it, Andrew Dice Clay's The Adventures of Ford Fairlane was adapted with new stories, and at DC Comics instead of Now. First Comics released Wendy Peeney's Beauty and the Beast, Night of Beauty. Eclipse was still releasing new issues of Miracle Man.
Excerpt from 1999's Wizard Alex Ross Millennium Edition Special, Full Exposure by Scott Brick, Issue 5 cover. At this point in their working relationship, Ross and Now Comics weren't exactly getting along. Ross took out his frustrations by inserting the phrase, Now Comics blows, in the lettering on Issue 5's cover. It's backwards, but it's there.
Chapter 5, The Heart of Skynet. Inside NORAD, the humans seek the central processing unit, Skynet's brain. It's just so quaint that the entirety of Skynet is running off Windows NT from a single computer tower, coordinating all its forces via dial-up. Men, we're low on ammo. Hold your fire until you can hear the screech of their modems. With much greater foresight, the lead female inside is a white girl with appropriative red braids and a horizontal facial scar across the bridge of her nose and left cheek. She's the one Patch has to explain the concept of a CPU to, and then they spy the light bright board tracking the bombings. They're running out of time to save themselves and the world. Then another squad of T-800s in bondage gear show up. The Scar Girl proves herself a lioness, returning fire. John is impressed, and Patch says she reminds him of Sarah Connor. So you all had better take note of unnamed Scar Girl, the only other surviving female in the story, who will never appear again. You might ask, well, what about Aurora, the first ever Terminatrix that was cover featured and spotlighted in the second issue before disappearing in the next two? She's at the fore of these Terminators, and when Patch throws a grenade, she catches it. She doesn't throw it back or use her body to shield the other Terminators. She just stands there, saying I have it. Then a male Terminator next to her says, and they all blow up. Wait, the dumb bimbo robot just holds the grenade. And then the smart male robot also does nothing but say no with 5 O's and an ellipsis and a spiky exclamatory balloon, but with no exclamation points. So is the no just like a grating drone, akin to the sound of the dot matrix printer Skynet uses to send messages to its Florida forces or whatever. Meanwhile, outside, the trio of survivors are now miles away, having made it on foot over mountains in the rain and the magma with one of them wounded to the hidden power station. I now have to point out that Sue also has a facial scar, but hers is a sort of half-Joker grin starting at the corner of her mouth up her right cheek. Anyway, they lost their dynamite en route and have no means to overcome the 000 guards or penetrate the fortifications. By the way, I can now officially announce that the T-000 units will not be named here, but in a role-playing game sourcebook years later. Thanks Terminator.fandom.com/wiki. In NORAD, the Grizzlies blasted through a floor to escape more Terminators, then found the CPU. John Connor was lowered off a scaffold with convenient bungee cord, blasted at the servers, but was knocked down by patrolling T-800 endoskeletons. Outside, Jerry and Sue distracted the sweepers, while Tim Reese jumped a fence and ran toward a Jeep-mounted Mark 108 plasma cannon that he used to blast the sweepers. And then the ridge that was holding back a landslide from hitting the generators. My timing could be better, but I have to mention that this plan was mostly sussed out by Tim pointing at things and having the two speaking characters guess at the meaning, like he was Lassie the Wonder Collie helping get Timmy out of a well. This is the much better character that Ron Fortier made of Tim, the only surviving player that he didn't create for himself. So, the power goes out just before the sentry can shoot John Connor. Then came the silence. Oh God, the sweet silence. The puppet's strings had been cut. Skynet was gone. The metal monster just stood in front of me waiting for further instructions that would never come. The hunter-killers just fell out of the sky, the nuclear bombs blessedly not detonating on impact. Despite all that carnage, there were still dozens of humans to walk out of NORAD that morning. But just so the victory isn't complete and final, the eyes of a T-800 endoskeleton left in the dark reignite in the final panel.
How about the part where the Cindy Crawford Terminator
kisses the dude and like bleeds?
Right, like she kills the multiple people just the time how long it takes her to kill the people. Was she kissing him or was she biting him?
But the crazy thing is, they talk about how hunter killers were now using chemical weapons on humans and how they were, and I'm like, can Skynet not like figure out like the fastest? Like it really is a machine.
It's so inefficient.
Yeah, it seemed again. Skynet felt so dumb.
Well, and also again, why are we showing this whole sequence where she's killing the people and then literally she doesn't do anything else for the rest of the book except for catch a grenade and then everybody gets blown up?
Yeah.
So why did you waste the time building her up?
And did you notice one of the Terminators were like, no? I'm like,
right.
Wait,
why is it going no?
Like it should, and like when it caught, it been like, oh, explosive throw, and instead you have a Terminator reacting to it.
Yeah.
Or it would have found a way to lessen the blast, and you have a Terminator react like it's scared.
Yeah, fall on the grenade like we see in all the World War II movies.
It was just a weird. I remember reading it thinking like, again, this is 80s, so okay, these guys are trying to get a book out, but it doesn't feel well thought out sometimes.
It was super distracting, that one rebel who looked like David Letterman just randomly. And again, there's a guy who's on fire, so I think we're supposed to have some pathos here. And instead it was just a total distraction, wondering why David Letterman was suddenly in the book.
Then it seemed kind of weird that when they get to the power plant and they're trying to find a distraction and they just happen to see a truck with a laser gun in the back and they're like, oh look, if we can get to that gun, we can shoot the ledge and the ledge will crush. And I'm
right, they already had the landfall, the landslide, so they're going to make it finally hit because they had a ridge that was stopping it.
It was just kind of like, oh, okay.
So it was written by Ron Fortier. Have you ever experienced this ride before?
No.
Okay, Alex Ross. He works with Kurt Busiek early in his career. The guy gets some work. Well, before that, he worked on Wild Cards. Well, I think a story that was not published until many years later. And then Busiek helps to get him to do Marvels, and they collaborate on that together. They have such a good working relationship that Alex Ross goes on to paint every volume of Astro City that there's ever been. Mm-hmm. He's done pretty much every cover that was ever created for that series. Every trade paperback he's had art for. He obviously makes a point of doing that, so they've got a good relationship. Then he goes on to work with Mark Waid in Kingdom Come, and that was an instance where DC assigned him because he wanted to do it. And they're like, no, you need a professional writer to help you develop your ideas. And they had some pretty severe personality clashes. And ultimately, Ross had one direction he wanted to go after Kingdom Come with that content, and Wade had another direction, and DC sided with Wade. And Ross was ticked at everybody as a result of that. So it makes sense they don't work together that much anymore, right? And then after that, he hooks up with Jim Krueger because he really liked his work on Foot Soldiers. And then him and Jim Krueger do all that Earth X stuff, right? Mm-hmm. And then when he does Uncle Sam, he still feels like he needs a writer. So he gets Steve Darnell, and he's the guy who does the actual scripting on that. But he's the one who's coming up with the story and stuff. But for the most part, he's had this long relationship with Jim Krueger, who did the introduction to the 2003 version of this story.
Now let me ask you real quick. On the Earth X, who was the artist?
And that was John Paul Leon.
Oh.
He's no longer with us.
I
Leave the man
know,
alone.
R.I.P., but man, that art just ruined that book for me.
Yeah.
Cool concept.
I think it's interesting that the very first writer that Alex Ross worked with is Ron Fortier, and who does an introduction to one of the versions. I think Dark Horse sought him out for that. But Ross has never had anything to do with that guy ever again.
Oh, really?
Ron Fortier will tell everybody at every opportunity he gets about the time he worked with Alex Ross, and Alex Ross painted, he worked on the first book Alex Ross ever did. So he's constantly name dropping Alex Ross. Alex Ross does not ever have this guy's name in his mouth, ever, okay?
Spill some tea. Go ahead.
His intention when he took over the Now books was he wanted to do it like Sergeant Rock. He wanted to do it like the DC War comics and get into the characters and their circumstances as soldiers, all this kind of stuff. Obviously, there's an attempt to do that here because he's trying to do more of a grim and gritty story. But in 5 issues, he doesn't develop any of those characters to a degree that they mean anything to you, to the point where they're like completely interchangeable. And these characters were set up in the Now series. Some of these people were carried over from a little prelude he did, right? If his goal was to have an easy company kind of situation with these guys, he failed utterly. But I have to say, I'm very critical. People will know I don't hold back when it comes to criticizing. I'm not like, oh, I'm going to hurt their feelings. I don't care. But I try not to be like too personal about it. Like, I specifically dislike you as a person. I don't like that guy. I've read too many articles with him. I've listened to too many interviews with him. Besides the fact that he's vain and he's got Dunning-Kruger where he thinks he's a much better writer than he is. This is a guy who keeps talking about being a professional writer when his last professional work was decades ago. He is a vanity press author. He publishes his own stuff through vanity presses, and he talks
expletive deleted
about every collaborator he ever works with. I thought at least he spared the artists. He talked so much trash about the other writers who worked on the book and how he was saving the book and how all the other artists hated working with those other writers and how great he was. But when I was reading the foreword to the 2013 edition, he trashes his artist on Terminator too. So unless you have a name for yourself, because he also talks up Ben Dunn, who obviously had a bit of a career too, unless he can drop your name, he trashes you. And the guy's just got no class, and he's just a terrible writer. These stories are badly written. They don't make sense. Skynet isn't stupid. The guy who's writing Skynet is stupid. And it shows in this story because this could have been something special, even though Alex Ross is nowhere near where he's going to be, even though he's trying to rush through 20 odd pages of painted artwork per month, and he's cheating to do that. But he's still got some great shots in this. There's still enough gravitas to what he's putting on the page to where this could have been something special if any decent writer had written this. But Ron Fortier sucks. He's awful, and he's so arrogant despite being so awful. It's just so aggravating that I have a personal deep dislike of this gentleman at this point. I would never want to see this guy at a show, and I probably won't, because who's going to invite him? Just had to get it off my chest. It's very rare that I actually have personal animosity toward a creator, especially that I'm comfortable sharing. But this guy's just such a jerk that I have no problem saying I never want to talk to this guy. I never want to have anything to do with this guy. I'm perfectly happy to run him down because he's never hesitated to run anybody else he's worked with down, it seems like. So yeah, this was an extremely insubstantial story, right? It's just this is pretty much a waste of everybody's time, and especially Alex Ross's effort.
I would agree.
And dumb. Just really dumb. And like, these characters mean nothing. And their deaths mean nothing. And even their ultimate victory means nothing. And I'm glad that we don't ever have to read this guy's stuff again.
I agree.
The 9th issue of Now What? Here's a nice blurb from Newspeak. Apocalypse Later. The Terminator, The Burning Earth, special edition trade paperback, ships from Now Comics on June 15th, 1990. All 5 issues of the Ross Fortier Future Shocker in a single volume, comic size, perfect bound, and printed on Baxter paper with a brand new wraparound cover painted by Alex Ross. Get it while it's hot. And in our Comics, we see that The Burning Earth number 5 is supposed to have shipped on April the 6th. So the Amazing Heroes Preview Special number 10, $6.95 cover price. Your complete guide to 1990s coming comics. Features a cover by Rich Heaton and Tom McWeeny, courtesy of Dark Horse Comics. It's something of a parody cover. It features a bunch of different copyrighted characters, not necessarily Dark Horse ones, although they're in the mix too. You got Wolverine, Reed Fleming, World's Toughest Milkman, Mr. X, Charlie Brown, Gru the Wanderer, Raphael of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Flaming Carriage, Spirit, the Hulk, Megaton Man, the Jack Nicholson Joker specifically, RoboCop, Concrete, the Punisher, various and sundry comic strip characters. Now has a brief blurb in the graphic novel section. 3 collections are due from now in the first half of 1990. Terminator the Burning Earth, the post-apocalyptic miniseries, will be collected into one softcover volume, retailing for $9.95 in June. Unscheduled are collections of Ralph Snart Adventures and Fright Night, but both will definitely be released in early 90. The 11th issue of Now What? Under the wet paint section? Brush of Greatness, fully painted books that demand attention. The Terminator the Burning Earth, the graphic novel of this explosive hit, 5-issue miniseries, has finally arrived. A direct market exclusive, printed on 45-pound Baxter paper, should arrive in comic shops the last week of June. Written by Ron Fortier, this fully painted book is illustrated by comics newcomer Alexander Ross, who painted a wraparound cover, exclusively found on this graphic novel. The Burning Earth jumps ahead in the regular monthly story to the end of the human-machine war, where mankind has its final battle with Skynet. And then on the inside back cover comics, shipping June 1st, Terminator miniseries number 2 of 2 by Dixon and Del Sol, $1.75 US, $2.25 Canada, shipping June 15th, Terminator the Burning Earth trade paperback, Fortier Ross, includes new wraparound Ross cover, $9.95 US, $11.95 Canada.
The trade paperback collection of The Burning Earth was released on June 15, 1990, according to previews number 15, but Amazing Heroes number 179 pegged it as the first of the month, while 2 editions of Comic Shop News claimed June 21st. It bore a $9.95 cover price, a markup of over $1 on the individual issues. That's a great deal compared to the first full-color Dark Horse Aliens trade, collecting only 4 $2.25 issues in a $12.95 trade, a $4 premium over the floppies. Maybe Mike Richardson was trying to recoup the loss on the Black and White Aliens trade, which collected 6 $1.95 issues and a short from Dark Horse Presents for only $10.95. Over $1 less than the single issues? They hardly needed the money, as June of 1990 saw Dark Horse publish Aliens vs. Predator number 1 and Aliens, Earth War number 1.
Excerpt from the standard catalog of comic books from the editors of Comic Buyer's Guide and Comic Base, John Jackson Miller, Maggie Thompson, Peter Bickford, and Brent Frankenhoff. Again, we lack total sales numbers for Now Comics series because of how much of their sales were derived from the newsstand and how poorly those sales are reported. Also, poor reporting from all the different distributors that no longer exist that carried Now Comics in 1989, 1990, 91. But at least the Capital City distribution numbers show that Terminator the Burning Earth easily outsold in the direct market for that distributor anything else Now ever did with the Terminator license. Number 1 had a circulation of 10,525 copies, 2 9,275, 3 8,100, 4 8,500. So as the miniseries progresses, you see it actually begin to gain numbers toward the back end, ending at 9,650. So that the first and last issues of the title were the best selling of the run. There was also a trade paperback collection with a $9.95 cover price. It's the only collection Now Comics ever put out with the Terminator license. The Terminator All My Futures Past was not able to capitalize on the momentum of The Burning Earth. We only have numbers for issue number 1, 3,475, the worst sales figures available to us of any of the Now comic books. Dark Horse Comics' 2013 reproduction of The Burning Earth. Back cover copy reads, featuring career-making art by Alex Ross, Terminator The Burning Earth is the first published work by the Eisner Award-winning comics legend. In addition to the complete story by classic Terminator scribe Ron Fortier, this definitive collection includes Ross's return to the franchise with an original cover, plus additional art and sketches, remembrances from Fortier and Ross, and an introduction by Brandon Graham. There's also a sketchbook, very rough outlines from Alex Ross on these pages, concept sketches from this edition's new cover painting. Ross tried out several concepts using the T-808 Aurora, as well as a Terminator attacking a resistance fighter. In particular, there's a sketch of the Aurora pulling its own face off. Looks really, really cool. Honestly, I think it's a much better cover. I wish they'd gone with that one instead of revisiting the burning endoskeleton. But also in the sketchbook series, there is the sketch version of the finished cover for the 2013 edition. Some really nice fire effects, I'll admit. The 12th issue of the monthly news magazine, Now What? So in right now, there is a letter from a fellow named Eric Wang. I'm going to go ahead and read through this. Oh, storytellers extraordinaire, congratulations on Terminator Burning Earth. You have perfectly captured and extended the dark look and grim feel of the movie. The story is gripping and relentless and conveys the fantastic emotional pressure placed on humans in this world. Connor's thoughts in issue 1 summarize this pressure clearly. Fight or run. Never any time to celebrate your victories, and never any time to mourn your losses. How does the human mind cope with this kind of routine? It doesn't. It can't. The human mind is an extension of the animal mind, and as such is the product of billions of years of evolution. But these humans' current situation has never been encountered before in the course of Earth's history. They are facing the most frightening challenge that any living race can face, that of an intelligent foe bent on their total extermination. The only thing the humans possess with which to fight back are human intelligence and, above all, human spirit. But intelligence and cunning are useless if you lose the desire to apply them. Human spirit is really the star of the book. John Connor most lost his desire to live after 40 years of constant war in the middle of issue number 1. He was just about to blow his brains out when he was reminded, at a terrible price, about just what it was that made the war worth fighting. From that moment on until the end of the series, his spirit was strong enough to lead his people into the very lair of the beast, where they finally won their final real victory of the war. The artwork, especially the coloring, is simply breathtaking. Is the book airbrushed or fully painted? Either way, it rises to a plateau of quality which it shares with only a few other books. Well done, keep up the great work. Sincerely, Eric Wong. And the reply, Dear Eric, The Burning Earth is a fully painted series. I'm glad you were as pleased as we were with the dark, oppressive look and feel of the book, and thank you for a fitting tribute to one of our best miniseries.
New targets acquired.
Andrew R.
Artificial twins.
Twins are rising.
Bill at Spy Vinyl. Billy Hines.
Brian Walder.
C.H. Chris at Bat Books for Beginners. Chris Lydon.
The Comic Crush. D is in the round. Dave's Comic Heroes blog.
Derek W.C.
Dr. Pop Culture.
Dirk Ashton. Ed Moore.
At Teal Productions.
Gregory Litchfield.
Hal Kalbeck, who added Radical History of Comics on Film.
Iowa Joe is The Irredeemable Shag.
James Cameron Online.
Julia Rowell,
who added Tom Tini put in a lot of work into the Now Terminator run, but I had no idea that he worked on Robotech comics. But yeah, this run of Terminator comics I didn't know had a baby farm for making soldiers. It's a little strange, makes me think of the Matrix movies a little bit. I do wonder what a 1990s Terminator anime would look like, based off the wild ideas of this run of Now comics, like in the art style of Ninja Scroll, but these Now comics have a very airbrushed look to them, color-wise, when juxtaposed to the 90s Dark Horse Comics gritty look.
Keith G. Baker,
Ken B.
Lamar the Revenger, Lorenzo Sleestack,
Lucretia Garcia,
Maxo Max Apocalypse, Mike at Send Aliens to Me,
Mike Gala, Movie Matt Sirois, Negri Rose, No Pop, Old Monroe, Relatively Geeky Podcast Network,
Richard Field,
Sean M. Myers,
Superbound, Talk Nerdy to Me, and
Tyler Romo.
It's 2024, in the month of May, and the battle continues. The Terminator, All My Futures Past, with Tom Panarese.
You have been listening to Terminator Now, a Rolled Spine podcast. It's in no way associated with Hemdale Film Corporation, James Cameron, not even Arnold Schwarzenegger. I'm just the best impersonator Frank could find. But I'm pretty good, right? No infringement of rights are intended, and it's all covered by fair use. Anyway, nobody's making any money on this thing, and hardly anyone's listening anyhow, so don't waste your lawyer's time.